I've been performing full-time for the last 5 years. I used to do it as a hobby before that, as I used to break dance on the streets of Dublin with my brother just for fun. But I always had an aptitude for performing. All in all, the skills have taken me 10 years to acquire, whether it be breakdancing, magic, whip cracking, escapology, or riding a 7-foot unicycle. The intrigue that led me to street performing was that I used to breakdance with my brother on the streets. Now our performance skills were very limited. We used to get fascinated when other professional performers used to come to town, and they used to really work the crowd and make them laugh and clap and cheer. And I always wanted to figure out how that was done, because we didn't quite understand it. We had a little bit of knowledge, but not the same as they did, and I really wanted to do a show like them one day. Performance is very different than theatre, as I do it in a public setting, out on the street, wherever there's a crowd to be gathered. And this brings a much different dynamic than, say, doing a show in the theatre, as when you're in a theatre doing a show, people expect to see that show that they came for, whereas on the street people aren't expecting it. It's spontaneous in their eyes. So what makes it a different dynamic? Well, the weather, people's mood, things going on around you, cars, whatever. You just don't know what's going to happen on the street. But what makes a good street performer is someone who can play to the things that go on around them and make them part of the show. Street performing is a crucial element in our modern day society, because things are getting even more and more controlled nowadays, and to me street performing is that last kind of breath of fresh air. And I think when people walk down the street and they see street performing, it's almost like a valve. It's kind of like a release, because there's so much, especially in a city, there's so much tension and control. A lot of it's necessary control, but this kind of gives them a feeling of, it just takes the heat off a little bit when they see a street show. The best memory I've had from street performing isn't particularly the show where I've had the best response, or the show where I've made the most money. To me, it's the show where I've had the most fun and kind of played. I'll give you an example. There was this one show I was doing in Edinburgh at the time, and I was at the end of the show, and I was doing a fire juggle on top of the unicycle, and I just could not get the fire torches lit, and you could see the crowd were getting a bit uneasy. So what I did, just out of pure frustration at the time, was I just cycled off on the audience, and I cycled right down to the end of the hill. I was performing on a hill, and as I looked up the hill, I could still see the crowd there waiting for me. So I thought they'd just immediately disperse, but they waited there a good 5 minutes. So I waited down the end of the hill until they left. So 10 minutes later, I went back to the top of the hill where my show was, and there was just still one guy standing there and waiting for me to come back, and he gave me like a tip. It must have been a couple of pounds, £3, £5, I can't remember. My worst memory in street performing was I was doing a show one time, and it just went horribly wrong. Usually when you're doing a street show, if people don't like what you're doing, they'll just walk off. So at the end of the show, you're just left with people that are really into what you're doing. But this particular show, people didn't like what I was doing and didn't like what I was about, and they stayed till the end. And it wasn't only till at the end of the show it dawned on me that I was surrounded by about 200 people that really just didn't like me or what I was doing. And I think I ended up getting about £2. It was the worst show of my life. I define art in the way it pertains to my show by freedom of expression and spontaneity. I think what's important in a street show is that some of your character comes true, and your ideas come true, and that's what makes it artistic to me. I sleep like that every night. It's the only way to get good. Okay. I get the majority of bookings in the summer. You can check me out on OisinCharms.com, and it tells you what I'm about.